Greetings, I am Darkling and this is Ark Survival Evolved. Today we're going to be looking at self-supporting ramps. Now this is going to be a fairly in-depth episode. It's going to cover foundation work below the ramps as well as how to use the ramps to make scroll work. For those of you that have actually seen some of the scrolls I've done in the past, hopefully you'll be interested in that. So stick around and hopefully you will learn a few new tricks. Okay, so to do self-supporting ramps we're going to need a decent foundation. Now I'm going to show you a few things with foundations that are going to hopefully help you out. Now one thing we've got to remember when you're doing the foundation work is what you're actually going to have above it, because you kind of want to match the foundations to what you plan to have suspended. Now I'm going to reproduce what I had on my center mat build, which was kind of like a space station. It was suspended by 3 ramps. There was another structure and then more ramps suspending the top part. So first things first, I'm building the outer row of square foundations. Now what I mean by this is I'm connecting each of the squares with just a single try. Now when you're building a foundation hex like this, anything within this square is going to be a try foundation. Now if you had a couple of tries here, you could shrink it down to a single one in there, but when you're actually building like this, anything smaller than this is going to have to be a try. So I'm literally just going to do this outer row. Now the reason I do 4 of the square foundations is because I like to add the behemoth hatch frames. Now in order to do the behemoth hatch frames you have to have a 4 wide set of, whoops, I've done something wrong here, 1, 2, 3, I missed one. You have to have a run of foundations 4 wide and 4 long. So I tend to plan ahead. If I'm only going to use normal gates, then I would do 2 wide here, but I'm not. So now what we can do is fill in this little space in here. I'm going to be doing the whole build because as I've said on previous builds, people seem to want to see the whole process of how a construction is done. A lot of people go with the montage and they I'm guessing it loses a little bit of the information in translation. Now you'll see the whole process, including me stumbling over any issues that I come across, but it happens. Now there's a few tricks I can teach you with working with the foundations that can come in handy. First of all, we're going to have to fill in this little gap. Whoops. Takes a little while to get all these down. Okay. As you can see, everything on the inside, like I said, is going to be the try foundations. Now there are a few ways of doing foundation work where you don't actually have to fill in all of the space. Now I'm doing it on here because I need a certain amount of foundations within the middle to support the central structure that I'm going to build. But when you get out to the outside, you can actually leave quite large gaps in your foundation work, depending on how you're building above. See, what I tend to do is I'll build a foundation and then I will level it off to the highest point, and then from there I will cover that point from there with just the ceilings, Oops. And I will explain that in another video. Foundation leveling, it's basically allowing you to build over some rough terrain and still giving you a nice flat area to work with. So we've got 3 try. Make sure I've got my alignment right. Okay, excellent. So from here I'm going to add a little bit extra to the outside. Now what I've basically done here is, because of the way I've constructed it, my raised platform is going to be the size of this area here. So anything within the squares, so all this tri area here is going to be the size of what I have above. So from the outside I am going to extend this out just by a few. I don't need to make a whole base here, I'm literally just giving you an example of how to raise the ramps upwards and join them. Now on my center map build, like I said, I had it all raised up and suspended, and one of the things that was quite troublesome in the actual process was getting the ramps to connect properly, and it basically just came down to the foundations. Foundations are incredibly important when you're doing a build, obviously, because you know your building's got to be supported above it. But people neglect how much time they spend sorting out the foundations. They just want to chuck the foundations down and get straight into actually building. Whereas a lot of the time, if they'd taken just a little bit longer, they could have actually saved themselves a lot of hassle when it comes to actually building the rest of the build. Now, you'll notice on the S Plus forums, I don't know if anyone's, how many of you have actually gone on there, there is an example build for how to lay out foundations. And basically what they have is the hex, and let's give you the example here, and then they do a square flanked with those, and then from there they would do like that. Now you can build a foundation out like that, but I don't personally like this formation, because if you want to build a room on this, generally you build rooms with straight lined walls, but if every single layer of foundations you have outwards from the center has a zigzag line, it tends to be a little bit more problematic when you're actually doing the rooms. It's great for landing platforms, you get a nice roundish kind of look, but when you're actually doing larger builds it does tend to be a little bit of a hindrance. I'm not saying it's wrong by a long shot, it is an excellent way to go, but in this particular case you've got to be a little bit more proactive in the way you've got it set up. So how many have we got? We need to get another one out. Oops. Some more foundations. It's amazing how many foundations I actually go through with projects like this. Where is it snapping? Okay, underground, excellent. Okay, now you'll notice I've left gaps here. I really don't need to fill those in. You can actually get away with having quite big gaps. Like I said, if you've got a suspended top, then it doesn't matter. Okay, as you can see, we're almost all the way around. It doesn't take long to get the foundations down if you've got enough on hand. A lot of people are surprised how fast you can actually get a build to this sort of point, but if you get your head down and start getting into the flow of things, it's actually quite easy to achieve. As you can see, this is how I do it. Now, I would then build up, say, a couple of walls. It depends if I want to have a basement. If I'm having a basement, I might go up 4 walls, and then I'll put ceilings across the whole lot. And in doing so, if you've got ground that's uneven and whatnot, some of this won't be usable, and you can actually leave the big gaps in here, because I could even take this out here. You can get about 4 foundations width of space before you actually have to stick another foundation to get the support. It's a very handy way of working. Now from here, what I'm going to do is I'm going to put a couple of walls on the side. Again, I'm going to copy what I had on my previous build, because a lot of people have asked how I actually went about doing it, and the only way to do it is to actually just outright show you. I've tried doing it in screenshots before, and it isn't the easiest thing to actually explain. Now, I did go a lot higher. I'm not going to do the full height on this particular setup, because what I wanted is I wanted a courtyard of a certain size, and I needed the ramps to go up a certain amount for them to actually clear the building that I wanted in the very center. So from here I'm going to use an overlapping technique, put that in, bring a ramp down. Okay, so this is nice and simple. I've got my structure here. Now from here I'm going to raise the self-supporting ramps. So the first thing you want is a couple of ceilings down, and then you're going to add the walls to attach the ramps to. Now to do this, I am actually going to go with fly, just so I can maneuver around this a little bit quicker. I'm going to drop the walls below here. Now I've said this before, when you're snapping, always make sure you add the walls below the ceiling when you're snapping the walls above, because you want them to match. So if I put a ceiling across the top here, it's going to match that outside run, which I did wall to wall. If I start getting the ceiling gaps, it's going to cause problems if I screw it up on one of the other runs. So from here I'm going to stick down ramp on each, and then I'm going to do the same thing here, and I'm going to keep this going. Now you can remove the walls from below straight away if you want to. I'm a shocker for leaving bits of scaffolding until the last stage of cleaning a project up. Just the way I work. Everybody has their own issues. I actually had a tribe mate for a while who used to get frustrated with me leaving the slope wall gaps, and he would actually go through and eventually fill them in for me, which was really handy actually. I tend to do most of my builds solo, just because I know what I have in mind, and trying to portray that across to people it isn't all that easy. I mean, people who've actually spent quite a bit of time gaming with me still don't understand some of the processes that I use. There's another 10 of those. Oh, I got the wrong one. Okay. Did I just do the same thing again? Really? Manage that. Like I said, you get to see all the screw ups along the way as well. There's railings, there's ceilings. Where did I put the ramps? Did I not put ramps? I'm sure I put ramps. Okay, I'm going to have to go and grab some ramps. This is me searching through the text document I've got. I've actually got the S+ spawn codes saved in a text document, so I can copy and paste nice and easy. Okay, that's better. Probably got way too many railings on me now. In fact, I'll just drop some of those off just because I don't need the extra weight. Okay, so again, we're going to go out another ceiling. Whoops, got a snap funny there. Drop the ceilings, sorry, the walls below. Excellent. And what you can do is you don't have to, I mean, if you're using Fly or Ghost like I am at the moment, you can skip adding the ramps in. Quite a lot of the time I will actually build some of the extra structure while I'm at it. Some more. Because I'll be sticking sloped walls in these gaps here, I'll quite often do it as I go. But I'm, for the most part, planning to show a few more bits towards the end of what we can actually do with these ramps. So I'm going to put another lot of walls on the top here. I've got, oh no, there's the rope snap, excellent. More ramps on top, and then I've got to check where I am on my foundation work. Oops, okay, there you can see I've actually screwed that up, so I don't need those ones. Oh, cool. So that when things don't fall properly, excellent. Okay, now when I'm building in this particular manner, I would then go and skip one of these, and I'll go to this one over here. Now, I did this in the center mat build because I plan to use that particular row of foundations for going up again. So, yeah, I'll do exactly the same. Now, normally I would use this as large walls. I'm not doing it on this one just because I don't need to carry the extra weight. Oops. Okay. Now we're going to add the ceilings in. Same on that side, excellent. Now, like I said, this is to get the height before you actually start expanding with a self-supporting ramp. If you need to clear a bigger space below, it's just a way to go. Just take it up a little bit first and then go from there. Some more walls. Let's get 30 walls. Again, I'm going to drop the walls below. Something doesn't look right there. Very important that you get the correct snaps. If you don't fix the snaps issues that you see later on, you're going to have a lot more problems. I don't know if you've noticed, I've been snapping to the opposite. It's one of the techniques that I pointed out in one of my other videos. I'm really hoping that people get used to using the snapping to the opposites. It saves a lot of time when you're doing the builds. Lots and lots of time. Especially when you have some of those troublesome snaps that just won't go where you want them to. I need to go about another one after this. Excellent. I need to start doing some joining. Now, normally I would go and do a third support like this, but for this example we don't actually need the third. It's just not needed. Some more ceilings. So much easier than going and getting them out of a box. 20 of these. Okay, how are we? We are, yep, we're aligned with the one below. Excellent. Okay, so from here, what we want to do is copy what we have below. So what we could do is we could come out the one, do a try, and then go back in with the squares. But I don't actually need to do that because I know how this is going to go. What we're going to do is we're going to fill these in. We should be able to go straight across here Easier when I have all of the tri-ceilings I need. Time will be a lot easier. As you can see, because I made sure my snaps were all correct, I can snap directly onto the next one and there's no trouble at all. If you try and transition between square and tri up in the air like this, especially when you're connecting them via self-supporting ramps, it's really not a good way to go. You tend to end up with a lot more problems. So basically you can then go through and build it as you had below, and you can end up with quite a nice supported area. This whole thing will be supported by those ramps. The walls and ceilings that you're using to raise them up, you'd leave them all in and they're literally self-supporting. You can make them as tall as you like, as long as you've got foundations below that will fill in the support structure. As you can see, I've actually gone over that hole in the middle. Again, you don't need to fill in all the gaps of your foundations if you don't have to. When you build it like I do, you tend to go through a lot of structures, and you've got to be very aware of the build limits. I remember when I first started, I didn't even know there was a build limit. I just built and built and built, and suddenly Arc popped up and said you've reached the structure limit, and that was quite surprising. So I could now go and build another set of self-supporting ramps up here, and I could add another row of ceilings around the outside, which is what I did on my previous builds. So what I would do with these is I would tidy them up. Now, first thing was first is I would add ramps to the bottom of them. Now, some people use roofs. I try not to use roofs at all because I don't think much of the way they snap. They tend to be more problematic for me, so I try to avoid actually using them. Okay. Now I could just take it straight off there, but I like to have a nice strong looking support at the bottom. I do it differently every time though, so whatever goes for you, whatever feels good to you and whatever looks right. Now, one of the things with using these sloped walls is I would recommend, if you're going to just fill them in, oops, I need some more, to use the same ones to support, to fill in the same space. That probably doesn't sound very easy to understand. I'll show you when I've got them. Okay, so I'm using the it's the 0 I'm not using at the moment. Now I've used that on the bottom there, so I can't snap it to the top. I'm going to put the 0 in the bottom one here. Again, 0 there, 0 there. Now the sloped walls don't snap to each other, or they do snap to each other, but you can't snap the same side to itself. Now, as you can see there, I had to actually flip that one. Now, I don't particularly like having to do it like this, but I could cycle through the snaps and I'm not going to actually get it to go the correct direction, which means I have to do a complete swap with an E, flip it. Like I said, I'm not a big fan of actually building like this because you don't get a nice flush look about it. You end up with a bit of a step in, but it's just the way the snaps work since the I think people were exploiting the ability to actually layer certain items on top of each other, and it made it a little bit more problematic for PvP building. So we just have to work with what we've got. Again, I'm going to flip that. I'm going to put a ramp on. Now, I'm not going to fill in the other side on this one, I don't really need to, but as you can see I've got a nice little structure there. Sometimes at the top, instead of doing it like this, I might actually just take it straight up. 0. And just go straight into it. Other times I might drop a wall off there and then slope it upwards. So, come on. Oh, that's why I'm doing it. And then you could stick a tri-slope roof and taper it upwards. I quite like the look of that. It gives a nice little styly sort of finish on it. So what I'm going to show you on this side is, oh, actually I'll finish this. When I first did this build, I've actually done 2 renditions of this. I actually used railings up the sides. One of the problems I had was when you were running down the ramp, because it was extremely high, when you're running down the ramps, if you accidentally hit jump or you weren't paying attention, like you changed direction too fast, you could end up going off the ramp. There was more than one time that I killed myself in my own base just jumping off ramps. Not the best way to go if you're in a hurry. So some of the other things you can do is, instead of going with just the ramp structure, you can add a little bit to it. Now, one of the other renditions I did of this, I actually came up with a few techniques. Now, this one's a little bit more problematic. I actually used an overlay technique with the glass walls, so I actually had a glass top on it. It was exceedingly difficult to actually snap it. I had a lot of problems. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a slightly different rendition, and I'm going to go up another wall. I'm going to put slope walls on that, and then I might put a ceiling across the top of that. Again, it depends on what kind of build I'm doing. Oops, I need off there. Oh, now I've actually snapped that in place. I see what I've done. I haven't dropped the ceilings on, sorry, the walls on those. I've actually screwed up that whole line. What? Are we snapping to opposites, are we? Okay, so I'm just going to fix these ones. Again, this is just something you have to do. If you notice you've made a mistake, go through and fix it. If you just sort of wing it, you're going to have more problems later on. You're easier off just biting the bullet and go through and fix it all up. Definitely didn't snap right. Snap it to the opposite, no. Oh. I have to move my cursor, snap it to the opposite. So that one, oh, that looks like a ceiling space there, so I'm going to redo that one just in case. Okay, so I can remove the bottom ones now. Those. Okay, so from this side here I've now got a nice big wall going up, and from the top I would then stick a ceiling across. I did this with glass on my main build, came out quite nice. Some of the techniques that I use now are a little bit different than back then. Some of the snaps have changed, so it's a lot easier to actually do some of the structures. Now you'll notice that the ramps are actually sitting off it a little bit. Now if you want to fix this, you'll have to actually do more scaffold work where you add a ceiling. Still the right one. You want to snap like that, and that way you won't get as many of the gaps along the side. as you can see, that's a lot more flush, but then you get the step up over there. So it's one of those things that it comes down to what you aesthetically like. I prefer it like this personally. I like to not have too many gaps along seams. I just think it looks a little bit unsightly. You're going to get them a little bit anyway. I mean, you can see there's a little bit of a gap, but for the most part it's quite a nice seamless transition. So now you could actually run up and down your ramps without, you could jump, you're just going to hit the roof, you're not going to fall off the ramp. And that is basically how you can produce the self-supporting ramps. Now I'm going to show you another technique that you might find interesting. So first things first is I'm going to actually, well, I don't need to, it's all set up for me. I'm going to add a railing there. Now I've had a lot of people that have tried to do some of the techniques I have. Now railings will only snap to certain items. You cannot snap a railing to a sloped wall, for example. So if I try and snap it in, it's going to want to snap to that bottom one, but nothing else. Whereas if you've actually snapped this in place properly using that sealing technique that I just showed you, I should be able to just remove that, and there we go, we have a railing on top of it. Some people might be going, well, why would you want that? It depends on what you're building. I tend to do hatch frames as like I'll use them on a ramp to actually make a gate without actually having a gate. And I might want to do railings down it, and because of the way the hatches snap, you don't have the ability to snap the railings in place. So what I'll do is I'll actually go through and add these and then add the hatch frame in. I really quite like having the full transition, but like I said, if you use scaffolding, then you can produce snaps that aren't normally available. Now I am going to have an attempt at reconstructing something that I've done before. I don't know what my success is going to be like. I'm going to do more of these. Those. I'm going to have to sneak off and grab some glass walls. Guessing that the recording is going to be a little bit funny where I've alt-tabbed out. Now, this is where things get a little bit problematic, because overlaying techniques are a little bit of a hassle. With any luck I can get this to work properly. I'm going to use the dual snap point. I'm going to drop that down. Next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to add a glass wall. I think I'm going to snap it to the bottom. Okay, so I've got the glass wall snapped to the bottom. Now I'm going to take the sloped, oops, I'm going to snap it to the wrong one apparently. Okay, so let's try this again. Like I said, some of these snapping techniques, you're going to have more problems than others. You just got to be well aware that you're going to go through more structures. If you start stressing over it, you're just going to get frustrated over the whole build. There we go, that looks like it's the right one. So now what I want to do is snap in. There we go. Excellent. So now I can actually build upwards. I've got the ramp covered in, and I can have glass above, so I could actually do this side here with glass, which when you're on a ramp looks so much cooler. So I'm going to do a little bit more on this so you can see the full effect. That we're going to put, which one did I use? I believe I used this. See, I try and keep the same tile so then you get the same pattern all the way through. Oh, that did not snap in the right place. That snapped to the sloped. Snap to the opposite. It's about right. Awesome. And I'm going to try, and I do mean try, snap. There. Excellent. Now this is probably one of the more tricky snaps I've done. When I first did this, I haven't actually recreated it since I first actually did the build. I had so many problems because I didn't understand the actual snapping to the opposites effect that I'd come up with. Um, it's just one of those things that now I've actually got a little bit more experience. I actually know what I'm doing a bit more. It's not actually snapping where I want it. Yeah. That does not look like it's snapped in the right place. When you're in practice, this will take a lot less time. It's not what I want to do. Now what I'm actually looking at here to try and get my snap alignment right is I'm looking at the alignment of this wall versus the sloped wall to the right. I can see that right there it's correct and it's snapping above, so I'm going to snap to the opposite, and sure enough you can see that those two pieces are aligned at the bottom. And when I'm trying to snap here, I want that snap point where the two walls are even at the top. Okay, so now I'm going to drop another wall off here. Now because this is going to be a section without the slope wall, it's going to be a lot easier to snap it in. Still going to need a bit more glass. Snap it to the bottom, no. Snap to the opposite. Excellent. So now I can remove the scaffold. I can put in the pillar, flip it, any luck I won't bust anything. That's the big thing, when you're doing the filler work, the amount of times that I've actually busted stuff that I really didn't want to bust, yeah, that's really depressing at times. I'm going to fill in underneath with ramp, snap, go. Like I said, I really like using these ramps. They're really good because of the way the snap points are on them. You can snap them end to end, whereas the roofs tend to snap side to side. And there we go, we've got a nice little covered in area. Now, this technique is not good for using on a large scale. I have used it on a large scale. I wouldn't recommend it if you can help it. The reason being is it uses a lot more structures. Now I'm going to need a whole lot of sloped walls. Now the recording's going to be a little bit funky while I just alt tab and grab these pieces I didn't think I was going to use. Okay, so we're going to grab 10 of them just because I'm probably going to bust a whole lot. Like I said, I tend to go through a lot more structures than you might imagine. Funky snaps like this, you're going to go through a lot more, especially while you're learning. The problems that pop up are a lot more significant. There's one thing I don't like about these sloped glass ones, is for some reason the model, like the other ones, that they're an actual opposite image, whereas these ones are the exact same image. I find that a little bit of a hindrance at times. What earth is happening here? Why is that snapping up like that? It's really weird. Should be getting a big gap. Shouldn't. No, it's not giving me a... I've had that one before, but we're going to work with it. I'm going to make these clear anyway, so it doesn't really matter too much. As you can see, I've got those all in place now. I'm going to actually go with a solid roof on here. We've already got it in place. I'm just going to need some more ramps. Down. I did a glass top on the last one I did like this, which was really cool. It came out really well, but because you could see the whole build above, it actually caused a few issues with the FPS, because you could see so much of the build. Now I just realized I don't have anything around here to get thatch from, so I'm going to need model gun. And it's going to be a bit funky while I tab I cleared the area of everything in preparation for this build, so nothing there to really grab it from. This, yeah, that model, and then sides. Gonna make it experience tells me anything. If I try this on, yeah, anything with the try for some reason is the exact opposite of square stuff. So I'll have to swap it to that. Now again, I'm not sure what's going on with the ceiling gap there. That's really strange. It's almost like it's snapping the back of slope wall to the side of the glass wall, but I've not had that particular problem before. I might have snapped some kind of funky place maybe, but that's pretty much how you produce that. Again, those little gaps would probably bother me. I'd probably turn it so it's all clear, but that's how I would go about actually constructing this. I would probably, to get around this particular problem, I would probably go make it two-way again. So I'll probably try and stick in, it'll let me. Go. Railings. There should be heaps. I accidentally spawned a whole bunch before. Go. And there we go. So I'd probably go with something like that and then have a solid roof on it. And it still has a side on it so you can't fall out of it. And the more structures that you have down the side, the less of a problem if you accidentally demo something on the ramp. So as you can see, you can create some pretty funky ramps, and they're completely self-supporting. So you don't have to do anything funky like put invisible supports up the middle here. Everything's supported here, and you'd be surprised how much of this you can actually remove and still not have anything fall down. A few bits, and maybe the center will fall out of this. Maybe it won't. Go. So as you can see, there's quite a big gap there, and above it everything's fine. I'd say if you take another one of these out, things are going to start to actually fall, or it'll stop you from being able to place above. Go. As you can see, you can actually remove quite a bit of the stuff in the middle before it actually causes a problem above. Obviously I wouldn't do this on a normal build to show somebody because start falling apart. You can create some really funky looking stuff. I would probably use glass down the ramps and actually use a solid at the top just to match the ceiling in. But this is probably one of my favorite ways of creating ramps. I've shown you how to stick the sloped railings onto the sloped walls, which is a very useful technique, and I have something else to show you now. Now this particular feature I'm going to show you is something I've created fairly recently. I'm going to have to dump some of this stuff in my tree. Heavy, don't need those. I'm not going to need that. Definitely going to need these. That. Sloped walls. I think I'll leave it for now. I'm going to jump across and grab some sloped roofs. Again, the video is probably going to look funky while I'm alt-tabbed. Make sure I get try sloped roofs. Amount of times I've done this and actually brought in the normal roofs when I've wanted to do the tries. You're surprised how often I make mistakes. Okay, so first things first, I'm going to start with, just like we were, I'm going to start with actually making the self-supporting ramp structure. I want that there. I'll drop those off for the moment while I snap these in like I want them. Pop that back in place. Now, sometimes when I'm having problems with the snap, I'll actually remove anything else that's easy to remove, so I can get the snap without having to muck around too much. Another technique that you kind of want to go with if you do a lot of building is just to remove some of the problems. Okay, so I'm going to go up by that many. That out. Okay, cool. I'm going to bring out by another one. I won't be able to. Oh, yep, does snap there. Snapped on the OK. Ooh, actually, again, want to make sure you get the snaps in the right places, because if you don't, the alignment on this is going to be a pain. I've actually got a couple of bases where I've done this particular technique, and I've left the problem because it was kind of a reminder that I'd made a screw up on it. Right. Does. Okay. In up 2 and go out again. Okay, so pop that on there. Now I'm sticking this one on here so I can get the snap for that. Now if I remember correctly, this should make that fall off. Yeah, okay. So pop this first. Put that back in. That one back. Now because there's a ceiling there, that should stay there. Excellent. Like I said, scaffolding changes your life. I mean, building without scaffolding is such a hassle. You start using it and all sorts of things will open up for you. And I want to go on there. Actually need to use that scaffold after all. Okay, so this is basically built off the self-supporting ramp technique, which is pretty straightforward. Now you know how it works. It's pretty rudimentary. Most of the building techniques I use are very simple. It's just until you get your head around how easy they can be, I think people have a few issues with that. That was completely wrong snap. There we go. Okay, so I'm going to go another one there. This section. Now, anybody who's actually seen my the tour vids that Mazion had actually done on my bases will recognise where I'm going with this. Yeah, it's funny. I actually just realised yesterday that I was pronouncing Mazion's name wrong. I feel so bad. I was calling him Mazion, but apparently that's not how you pronounce it. If you're watching, I'm very sorry. I'm going to bring this down, drop that off there, and I think I'm going to come down a little bit more. Yeah. Well, I think I'm going to have to. Now, this won't be the best one I've ever done, but give you an idea as to how I actually construct these things. Should work. That. Give me quite a nice tight spiral here. Okay, so as you can see, I've started a scroll. Now, I've used this quite extensively on one of my previous builds, and people loved it. So, this is actually how you construct it. Again, it's quite an easy technique once you've got the swing of it. It's on the top, I think. Oops, spot there. Spot down here. Now, I'm going to only fill in one side of this because you'll get the idea pretty easily. Now, I need to bring in those high roofs. And I'm going to start on this back section here. You've always got to start at the bottom, remember, with these. That into place there. One on top. Swing that down. Now, it does not look like a good snap. Right. Tried snapping to an opposite there and didn't quite come out. Oh, this one's not going to work for me. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to remove that piece there, snap it exactly where it wants to be, put that one back. Like I said, if you remove some of the sections, it's just going to be a lot easier for you in the long run. So now I'm going to come back down here and do the other side of it. Come on. No. No, I don't want that one because I won't be able to snap underneath it. Right, come on. Okay, I snapped to an opposite there. One more for this section. That does not look right. Okay, so again, I'm going to remove that one piece, snap that in there, and replace that. Okay, excellent. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to drop 2 walls off this to make sure I can get that lower snap. Okay, I'm going to have to snap that to the... Oops, I've moved my cursor, so this probably won't work. Start falling down. Go, and it snapped into place. Snap that to the opposite just in case. No. So now if you use the scaffolding I can get rid of it. As you can see, I'm starting to get a bit of shape here now. Just going to add first a couple of sections of this into place before I stick the walls in, just so I access the inside if it snaps wrong. Some more of those. Excellent. Excellent. So now I'll fill in this spot. Wall. And we go upwards again. Again, start from the bottom upwards. Okay, it's going to be problematic. I'm just going to remove that section. I can get away with not having that in there and just building it from the bottom. It is a good way to go if you're wanting to reduce structure count. Show you what I mean. So I can actually ignore that piece in there is not there. I do generally add it in just so that I've got some extra support within the structure. Again, you don't really want to reduce. If this was a structural piece, I probably would make sure it was in there. With a piece of decoration, I probably wouldn't bother. Some walls. They don't need glass ones. Stone, there we go. Then okay. Not the one. Okay. Really doesn't want to give me that snap, does it? Was. And it's close enough, yep. Okay, and for the bottom here, I'd probably just you can't snap onto those. There's ceilings. Probably snap something like that. Of course, I've screwed this up because I didn't first. Okay, like I said, make a mistake, fix it. Follow on, excellent. So yeah, I tend to go down and do a nice little dip there, and then I would probably come back up side, and then I'd carry on with the sort of scroll work that way. But as you can see, that is how I create my self-supporting ramp scroll work. So I've used this in some of my last builds quite extensively, and I just think it looks gorgeous. I've used it as support for a base. I used it for a decoration. For the first base that I used it on, it was decoration. And when I did the top, I actually screwed it up and it was sticking through into the main build. When Mazion did the tour, I noticed that he actually stopped and looked at it. So if you've seen the tour vid, you can go back and rewatch that spot and you'll see where it's sticking through. I left that there purposely. I could have gone through and fixed it, but it was a reminder as to where I screwed up, and sort of a reminder not to do it again. I occasionally do that for myself, as force myself to remember to clean things up. So as you can see, it does look pretty stylish, and I hope you might be able to use things like this in your own build. I hope you enjoyed today's video. If you want to see more, remember to subscribe, hit the like button and whatnot. There's a link in the description to my Discord, which has a number of screenshots from my past and present builds. So feel free to stop in and say hi.